All right, this game is an interesting combination of circumstances. It's no longer in production in the United States, and I believe it's no longer in production in Germany either. Around the year 2000, there were two role-playing games that were coming to the United States from Germany. Die Vorzog, which is more of a typical fantasy RPG, and then there was this interesting creature. This is Engel. Engel is made by Feder and Schwert. Feder and Schwert is a company that used to publish White Wolf World of Darkness products in German for German consumption. And being huge fans of the World of Darkness, they came up with their own version of World of Darkness in Engel. Much like you have games like Vampire and Werewolf and Mage in World of Darkness, Engel simply means angel in German. This came to the United States in the strangest of form. The OGL license for D20 was in effect at that time, so this game came over as a D20 port. Very odd D20 port too. It's a great setting to roleplay in. I'm going to explain that here in just a second, but a lot of people have had issues with the D20 aspect of it and how it was ported over. They eventually did release the original system as a PDF, but it wasn't tied in as a statistical system to everything else. They just released the core system for how that worked. So Engel is a very interesting setting on top of being a D20 system. So technically you could port other D20 items into this, but I'd not recommend it. The setting by itself is what makes this good. I can't think of a D20 product that would actually complement this very well. Most of them complement Dungeons & Dragons. This does not. It's a D20 game, but it's not Dungeons & Dragons by any stretch of the imagination. Let me introduce you to the setting of Engel. I'm going to jump around a bit. So it's not like World of Darkness where it's modern. It is the year 2654, and Europe has flooded. This game was also written in like the year 2000-ish, so it's pretty much a 20-year-old premise. So it's different than the Europe of today. Keep that in mind. But what happens is that in this setting, humanity has tried to recover from the apocalypse and a flood, and the Catholic Church has kind of come back as the guardians of humanity. It just so happens, at this point though, we have large towering pillars of flame start burning themselves through the landscape close to Europe. It takes out there used to be a fortress here, and it took out one of these fortresses. And so Europe is on the verge of this whole new conflict with these creatures called the Dreamseed. If you are not a fan of giant insects, this game will scare the shit out of you, because it's all about demonic giant insects versus futuristic medieval Europeans and their angelic allies. In response to these giant burning things cutting holes in the face of Europe, or starting to cut holes in the face of Europe, make note that it does go across the water as well. Funny, right? Well, as a result of that, the people in Rome say, we're going to reach out to heaven and see what we can do. Lo and behold, angels start showing up, right? Funny things. So the characters can play humans, but you're allotted to play the Engel. And I'm going to go ahead and see where I can find the actual... I like the art style. It's a combination of different things. A lot of it looks like that. There's your primary art style of this book. But there's also a few that look like old engravings, like the Dürer kind of woodcuts and whatnot. But for the most part, there are... Okay. So much like in World of Darkness, where you have clans of whatever different supernatural species you're part of, same thing with angels, or the Engel. I like to use the German term to specify Engel versus... Because angel is a very widely, broadly applicable terms. You could say a beautiful woman is an angel. You could say an eldritch abomination that glows constantly, that is acting on the side of good on behalf of the ultimate being of the universe, is also an Engel, or an angel. So Engel I use to differentiate. But you have the Ramielites, who are usually colored gold. You can't show that in a black and white book. But they usually have gold accoutrements on their mostly white clothing. And they are kind of like... they're kind of like the paladins. You could say they're the leader class of the Engel, but they're fighting types, and they do a lot of things like smiting people with lightning bolts, and they have the ability to do paladin-like stuff, essentially. There's those. Then you have the Gabrielites, who they have a thing with flaming swords, and so a lot of their recruitments tend to be like this black fireproof material. As weird as that sounds. And then you have the Rapahelites, who usually just have like white and silver recruitments. They're the healer types. They're all about like healing people and doing various interesting things. They have a lot of healing abilities that only affect humans, which is really weird. The Urielites, they have like usually green recruitments. They are the your ranger types, you might say, and they're actually pretty cool if you ask me. I didn't go into what bases they come out of, because the Engel come down from heaven, from these things called heavens, right? And the heavens are located in various different cities. I'll bring it up in a second. But here's the Urielites. They have like green as their recruitment color. Because most Engels dress in like white and like pale gray and pale blue. You get the idea. They're heavenly creature looking things. But they have detail colors that show what clan they are. That and the Urielites are almost always packing a huge bow. The Gabrielites are almost always packing a huge flaming sword. You have the Ramielites, and the Ramielites are kind of like your wizard types. They're more like sages. They're a lot about knowledge and investigating things. They don't cast fireballs. They're a lot more investigative than that. And, so yeah, and let me bring out the Himmels. Michaelites, of course, come out of Rome. The Urielites come out of Mont Sauvage in Iberia. The Granatopiel in the Alps is where the Ramielites come from. So in Frankish territory. Nuremberg in Germany, or ex-Germany in this case, is where the Gabrielites come out of. And then in Prague, we have the source of the Ramielites, and their knowledge center is kept there. It's kind of funny because Engel are a very interesting thing to play, even though there's humans everywhere, and you talk about humans. Engel are weird creatures. Sorry guys, they're not multi-ethnic. They're like these really pale-skinned, pale-winged, pale everything. They're covered, they're about like 4.5 to 5.5 feet tall, and they kind of have a very androgynous look to them. And the best way to kind of, I guess, tell you what they're like as like a race is that they're kind of like shonen protagonists with wings, the race. Literally, they tend to have like, weird hairstyles, usually spiky hair or some kind of weird top knot. And their bodies are covered with like golden tattoos. They're crazy a take on the angel as being a thing that you could have in mythology. They're actually kind of weak for being angelic in nature. Most of them are essentially a warrior sage that has a flight ability. In the D20 version, you paid out of your hit points to use your special powers. So it was really low powered, and you injured yourself to use your special powers, on top of the fact you had to make a skill check. I changed things when I ran this campaign. I ran a campaign for 2 years, actually. Or was it 1.5 years? It was a long campaign. But I ran one hell of a campaign of Engel back in, I think it was 2003, 2002. It was a bit back. But in my campaign, I threw out that one rule where you had to use your hit points. I had a different way of running it. I don't have all the details on me, but I definitely modified a few things to make it a little bit better. I know there was actually some, we found some typos. Let me go look at some of the old rules back here. Yep, there's my typo page. The armor weights are actually typoed. If you look at them, you're like, what? There's no way that, according to this, it's like 110 pounds for a suit of heavy armor. It's like your heaviest suit of Maximilian plates, like 60, 70, Of course, these are measured in kilograms. It has 55 kilograms. We did our math, did some research, and changed the weights on those. And of course, I have my little sticky note there. As a setting, let me talk about the setting, because role-playing wise, it's kind of a, it's a role-playing game. It's got the D20 aspect of it is very D20-like, so it has the faults that come with being a D20-based game, or a D20 system-based game. But setting-wise, there's actually a lot of fun things about this ruined Europe you play in. It's not just the return of Catholicism and welcome to being a serf of the Catholic Church. There are plenty of, they're called diadoches in this setting. The diadoches are non-religious people who have taken up to collecting old technology and trying to use it as best as possible, which is heretical if you're part of the Church of Rome Eterna, what they call it. I believe it's called the Angelitic Church or something strange like that. It's proto-Catholic. It's not actually Catholic. There's a lot of instances you'll come across in the Engel setting where you'll have people have adapted to almost a Eastern style of living. You have, this is what your average soldier looks like. This isn't an Engel. They've got a similar thing going on, but they have a long sword they use where it's got a long handle. They're Templars and the Armatura, who are the leader heroes of the Templars. They tend to dress very similar to the Engel. So robes are in fashion, as well as like arm bandages and very strange hairstyles. So your human warriors have almost a slightly Asian aesthetic to them, because you know this guy's got sandals, he's got the big pants, he's got haidate, is where it's strange, very European looking haidate, but still haidate, and the long sword, which has the long two-handed grip. Looking through, there's a diadoche decorated by CDs, ha 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 ha. So yeah, here's a picture of one of the towns where they've got like the stilts above water. You got this kind of Venice-looking thing, but the people actually do have like, you know, it's a weird combination of like Asian and European fashions, you might say, in this period. From what I've heard, the reason that we have this apocalypse take place in Europe, and there's a reason that Europe looks like this, the caps have melted. It's warmer down here now. So even though it's colder up in this region, we lost Finland. Isn't that sad? We lost, I think Poland's right here. Prague being here is weird because this is Nuremberg. I don't know why Prague is here. I don't know. I need to compare this against a real German map. But here's Nuremberg and here's Prague. So the scaling's kind of on the weird side. Oh, here's Moscow. So Russia is technically right here anyway. So I guess this is Poland. I guess this is Leipzig. So Berlin is lost somewhere down here. This is there's one thing about the setting I wanted to bring up also. There is a spoiler in this book that you're not supposed to read past. Of course you could read past it. It's all in one book, right? But where is it? Let me find that. Okay. This is, when you see this, flipping through, reading through it, this is the last page a player should really read until they, of course, get back to making a character back here, right? But this is the last place a player should read. When you get to this part, just stop. Let the GM take over at this point. A lot of enjoyment of playing Engel is based on having these secrets that you uncover as a player character. So if you really want to, you can spoil yourself, but you're going to lose some of the fun of the game. All in all, there's a lot to... Engel actually wasn't produced for a long period of time. There's a lot you could develop the setting into, but it never developed out in that direction. In the United States, in Germany, I don't know. I don't know where Germany took this game. It may have just been a game that hung around in the early 2000s, much like this one was. So this is the Engel main book, and I am actually relatively well appointed in terms of Engel stuff. One of the first things it came out with, weirdly enough, was a comic book, I guess you can call it. It's a graphic novel. It doesn't have page numbers, so it's not really a novel. It's got 44 pages worth of comic, and then about a fronts page and an ends page for a total of like 48 pages. It's got the typical art style of Engel, where it's got these, of course it's pure black and white. It's actually pretty well written and pretty well done. Sometimes the art is a little hard to follow because of how stark it is. Stark art, I hate to say it, you have to be very careful about how you're assembling your art to avoid having it not be readable. It's very aesthetic, but the visuals, they can get a little bit lost at times. So here's just the comic book. It's called Pandoramicum. I got mine for relatively cheap. And it's in great condition because guess what? Never really used this. It's not a game item. But it's weird. They have this as like a background setting thing for Engel, and you can add it to your collection, even though it's not a gaming book. This is the other thing that you really should or maybe shouldn't get a hold of if you're playing Engel seriously. This is Creatures of the Dreamseed. It is your monsters manual, but it's not a monsters manual. The back has, like, most of the creatures that are listed in here are in the back of the book, where all the stats are for D20 stuff. It's actually a reading experience. You open it up, and it's pretty much a... It's pretty much like there's footnotes, and then there's an official copy that's sent to the Pope, the Pontifex as he's called. So it's the journey of this guy named Fra Domenico and how he's encountered these monsters of the Dreamseed. And it's got a bunch of horrendous art in here. It goes on. It's got like the image of the Templar fortress that tried to hold off the Dreamseed assault. As I mentioned, the Dreamseed are like giant insects. If you have a problem with giant mutant insects, this game is not for you. So there's a lot of frightening beasties in here. These are your most common enemy, by the way. These dragonfly-looking things. They're in the main book. In the main book, you have scarabs and dragonflies. In here, you have scarabs and dragonflies. And here, you got a lot more stuff, including massive shit you shouldn't fight because, oh my god, they're horrible. Yeah, you got all kinds of, dark creatures like that, just looking to tear your humanity limb from limb. And the Dreamseed, much like the Shadowlands and L5R, is corruptive. It can infect you with stuff that turns you into a Dreamseed. So, all in all, the setting itself is very interesting. You've got these post-apocalyptic Europe you're running around with. Oh yeah, and it turns animals into weird stuff too. This animal is slowly dying. There's a bunch of other weird crap in here, but still, yeah, it's all in all. Yeah, here's where the actual rules are. There's only like 20 pages of rules, but all in all, it's a. This is a good addition because this is like a GM's book for just knowing all the stats of the bad guys. And it does give you statistics in here for making animals into Dreamseed animals and making humans into Dreamseed cultists, essentially. I did it before I bought this. This I actually bought relatively recently. But I kind of improvised it based on what I could get out of this. I think these guys have higher power ratings than the guys I cooked up off my own thought process. So this is Engel. It's cool. I really do like the setting. The role-playing game we tweaked with the system to make it actually playable. It's not a good idea to approach this like Dungeons and Dragons. Treat it like you're playing the D20 version of a World of Darkness game, and you've got something. But yeah, I don't think anybody plays this game anymore in the United States. There may be a few outliers. I know people own it. I know a lot of people actually saw this come out and go, oh, this is pretty cool. But yeah, so this is Engel. And it's a weird twist on World of Darkness and Europe. If you find it and have a copy, go ahead. It's a good little game to dig around in. The PDF is available online. Just Google it. You'll find it in like a page or two. But yeah, this is Engel. And hopefully you enjoy it as much as I did.